S.1 Warren. I'm your host of See I Am Me. And today, our episode will talk about the young adult's perspective. So I have my son on here today, RaKim Warren. And we're going to go through some question and answer and just have a big discussion about how the young folks are seeing us these days. And I know it's kind of a hot topic, but when we talk about how we lived our lives and how we did everything for our youngsters, how about did we really involve them in the position to make decisions of how they wanted to live, or did we just think that we can do it ourselves? Now let's welcome in RaKim Warren.
Hello, nice to meet y'all. Nice to meet you. Um, Thank you for bringing me on to the show today.
Hey,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you can come on. I know you're busy. You're out at school doing mechanical engineering. You're in your fourth year at Purview A&M. So tell us a little bit about the college life.
Well, college life, it's different for everybody, but my experience with the college life is, I'm not big on doing a lot of extra things. I'm just here to get my study on. Get through school and get out there into the workforce. So majority of my day, I really just spend just studying on a day-to-day basis, making sure I can go in there and perform. In my free time, I like to hoop. So, college life's been enjoyable for me. I've had lots of ups and downs going through college, but at the end of the day, I kept on pushing and I've been enjoying it.
So tell us right now, from a college kid, how was it from your first year to how it is now? I know your first year was a COVID year. You did things online. So how was it racking stack uh, from day one when you arrived on the college campus to your fourth year now?
Well, it's been a huge difference, and part of that change has caused some of the struggles I've had during my first through fourth year. Coming in my first year during the COVID year, that whole year coming up into my first year, we went on spring break in high school, and then we really didn't come back. So I jumped straight from the middle of my senior year of high school right into the college life, and the college life is not wasn't the same as what you would expect. You come here, you're zoned off, can't really meet with many people. And as you know, I've caught COVID a couple times during that, and being in quarantine and having to learn everything online. It was a big challenge for my first year, and it caused me a lot of struggles as well. Uh, just coming in and not really knowing how college is gonna be, and then experiencing a already challenge that some people who are already been in college are experiencing as well. Experience that fresh for me. Having to learn a lot of stuff on by yourself was a big challenge. You put a lot of new information in front of you, and just having to go through and figure out how to learn and what's the best things to look at, best things to do in order to be successful was, is something I had to figure out for myself during that first year.
I
Uh,
mean, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nice. But from that first year, and then going into my second year, it was getting a little bit better. A lot of that still kind of stretched into my second year. But as I moved on, I started getting a hang of it, and then the big jump was, coming from learning how to do everything online and kind of struggling in that aspect is to jump into, back into how things are supposed to be, going to class every day, uh, talking, meeting up with new people, just being in the classroom and interacting with teachers and all that. That was a big challenge to go from doing a lot of stuff on your own to, you know, having to work with different people and then having different resources you can use and figuring out how to use those different resources. So yeah, the first to fourth year is a lot of change going on, just due to when I came in and how the world was working during COVID. To it kind of felt like the world changed a lot after COVID. Even though things got back to normal, a lot of the things that were how they used to, weren't really working the same way anymore. Things for the better and worse. Some things got better. Technology got better. A lot of resources out there you can use to get you through school online were available. But it's a lot of things as well. People and teachers and all that kind of felt like it slowed down. School kind of felt like it slowed down. Um, but that's pretty much my first to fourth year, the difference in life.
Yeah, that sounds pretty challenging. I mean, I couldn't imagine because I wasn't a great student. So if I would have went in there during that time, the holdup probably would have got me. So I applaud you and all those other kids for being able to navigate those things. Hey, that was a great way to bring in the segment in the show. So we're going to go to a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to dive right in and get some of your perspective, RaKim.
Focus up. Hey, man, zoom in. Hey. Welcome. My name is Chris Rubio of the Rubio Method. Soak it in. Wear it as a nice sweatshirt, a nice yellow sweatshirt. See if it fits. And it may be something you say, okay, I'm listening to you, but I don't really like it. Not for me. What the hell are you thinking? You have no idea what you're talking about. You have issues because of your bad taste.
All right, so we're back. So, RaKim, we just talked a little bit about how your first year of college was, you getting out into the unknown, the world had changed. COVID was a thing. You caught COVID twice. So you were battling with that. You're like locked up in the barracks. People got to bring you food. You're trying to go to class online. You got teachers that you can't get a hold of. And you're a mechanical engineering student. So you got all these things stacked up against you. But even though you were able to be mentally tough and get through all those things, what do you attribute that to? What made you strong enough to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to have to pick myself back up and keep it moving?
A big thing, that really had that mentality in me, even though sometimes it felt like, I really backed myself into a corner, nowhere to go. A big thing that got me through that is just how I was raised. I feel like I learned a lot of those things from seeing you, and you express those mental fortitudes and getting through a lot of hard times that you had to. I remember times that you showed me and told me a bunch of these stories about how you made it through a lot of tough times. And, I carry a lot of those with me as well. And I think plus that part of that's really um got me through that well is like you said, you in the military, you haven't been there all the time. You've always been there to support me no matter what. But it's not like I always had somebody right next to me I can just walk to and talk to, have a conversation with. Uh, so I felt like I learned a lot of skills where I was able to by myself, get through situations, figure things out, and learn how to handle certain things. Um, even though it seemed like nobody was there, I was able to go ahead, push through, and learn a lot of fortitude as well. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot of things from you, a lot of mentality, a lot of stories, and a lot of that really pushed me through a lot of those times during school where I felt like I really didn't have anywhere to go.
Yeah, all of that is intentional, I think. I remember we used to go to the hospital whenever, because you always was hurting yourself when you were little. So we go to the hospital and the doctor talking to me, I'm like, hey, he the one that's hurt, like talk to him. I thought like that was the way to help you be able to communicate with other people when I wasn't around. And I say it was all done intentionally because being in the military is hard because you always away, you always deployed, you always doing something. And we rarely grew up in the same house. Very few opportunities that we had to be in the same household. So it's kind of you're trying to be deliberate and make sure your kids understand. And I'm glad it helped you out. But life is different for all kids. Some kids grow up in their family with their biological mom, biological dad. Some kids' families get divorced. Some kids, they got to incorporate themselves into a new family, based on the adult's decision. I know for my life, me and your mom didn't work out, but me and Jen were together, and then you at one point had to move with us during during your high school years, and finish out like your middle high school years with us. So how was that for you? How was that decision that I made not to like be with your mom but be somewhere else? How did that affect you and your upbringing? How did you see the world because of that?
Well, during my upbringing, despite the decision, having a separate parents, separate mom and a dad, uh, I never felt like either parent wasn't there for me. So I feel like I was in the best situation possible. I had a dad that loved me, I had a mom that loved me, and no matter what, they always was there for me. So I never struggled into the aspect of where somebody was missing. And that's always a good job. And I feel like a lot of parents can take a lot away from that situation. Even though things might not work out, it's always in the best interest to have two parents, always make sure that they're there for their kid. I never felt unloved from either side, and that's a big thing that really got me through that. Even though the situation is not as fortunate, it's still was a big part of my life, and it's something that didn't really affect me to an extent where I felt like it was dragging me down. Yes, there's times that you want to see one parent, you don't want to spend time with other parent. Sometimes there's a little bit of conflict going on, but at the end of the day, it's about just loving your child, and that's something that I always received. So it wasn't a big issue while I was growing up. I always loved everybody. It was no hard feelings from me. It wasn't really a big struggle for me to go through.
you know, and the love piece, I guess like from your eyes, like what would you say to a kid who grew up in two different families, but like never really felt that love? Like what would you say from your perspective, from a youngster's perspective? How would you approach that kid that family separated or they never knew both parents? What would you say to them to help them?
Well, what I say is, the big thing is, you know, uh, you see a lot of people out there making poor choices. You see a lot of people out there making poor decisions that are in that situation. And a big point to make is, you are your own person. You might have those times where you see bad examples in your parents because you're in a poor situation. But at the end of the day, you have to go out there and discover yourself. You got to see who you are. And part of that is just, always pushing and finding something out there in the world that's a good example. You might not have a good parent, you might not have a good mom, dad, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, there's especially with the internet, there's a lot of information out there, good and bad. But there's also people in your lives that set good examples. You can look at success and pull a lot of things from that. You can see who's successful. You can see who is living a great life, who is having a great family. You can look out there in the world and you can discover a lot of those things and put them together and help you discover yourself. Um, so that's really my advice. Just make sure you're your own person. Don't let your poor circumstances affect who you can be in the future and how you behave and how you act and the decisions you make.
Yeah, that's great. You might not have it, but you can still seek it, and you can't let the shortcomings of your parents hold you down, right? But since we're talking about you being your own self and you searching for those things that are good, I want to say like each parent and their child, they have a certain relationship, right? The child, because I had the same with my mom. My mom was a single parent. She raised all five of us by herself. She had me when she was a kid raising a kid. I looked at my mom and all of the resiliency that my mom showed turned into me. And then even though I never knew my dad, once you came about, I was like, I'm going to do everything with this guy that I always wanted to do that I never had a choice to do. So my dad made some decisions and shaped who I was, even though I never met him. But when you think about yourself and me or your mom, how did our like values and priority affect how you were shaped? Do you think what we thought what was important shaped you as how you saw the world and the priorities you set?
Yeah, of course. It's a big thing. With kids, you're like a sponge when you're growing up. There's a lot of things that you see, and there's a lot of things that you pick up. And I picked up a lot of things. I always, seen how resilient you were, how hard you worked, and a lot of things you accomplished, and that's always been a motivator for me and what I want to accomplish. And my mom, I believe she's like one of the nicest people in the world, and I feel like I got a lot of my characteristics. I feel like I got a big heart. I learned a lot of things from her as well. It's that's why it's always important, as a parent to make sure that it's to show, lead by example, and that's a lot of things I picked up just because y'all led by example. A lot of things that I've seen you do, a lot of things I've seen you accomplish, a lot of things that I've seen you talk about, and situations I've seen you handle. I've always carried that with me, and every time I present myself in a similar situation, I've always got like a blueprint that I can kind of go off of to see how I can get through that situation, and that's just something that always carries with you, because you can go your life a long time and not have that situation pop up, but as soon as that situation pops up, you already know that you've seen this before. You know how to somewhat handle it. You know how to get through it. Because you've seen people do it before. So it was a big part in how I've really handled a lot of things in my life, a lot of situations I've been through, and yeah, so a lot of things I have picked up from y'all too.
Yeah, I remember, you were going through it one day and you like called me and you was like, hey, this is going on. And, and I told you, I said, hey, man, there's a lot of people that don't got things I do. Think about the positive things that you got going on for you. Because I felt a lot of pain growing up because I didn't have the dad out there, right? So I'm like fighting the world, doing all this craziness, right? Because I think that's the way based off of how I was raised. But in my mind, I was like, RaKim will not experience the things that I experienced. So I kind of threw you in a bunch of different situations and approached things kind of weird, right? Sometimes I remember when I made you cut your hair, right? When you had your hair, and I was like, you cutting your hair because you look like this, and no one's gonna want, you know. And when you cut your hair, then I felt bad because I was like, man, I didn't allow him to be himself. I forced him to do that. From that situation, how did you take that situation? Because you felt like you were forced to do something that you didn't want to do. How did you think that affected you, or how did you look at that? Because I thought it was right. So what did you think?
Well, obviously, I didn't want to cut my hair off. I wanted to keep it. So I wasn't too happy with having to cut it off. But at the end of the day, uh, when I know you love me, so it was always, I knew it was coming from a good place, good intention. So it's not like I took it the worst. It's not like I sat there and pouted for weeks. I obviously I didn't want to lose my hair, and it's just, go to school, you ain't got no hair no more. Everybody's saying something about it. But at the end of the day, I just kept it pushing. I can always grow it back. So it's not like I was gonna let it change how I thought about you, or nobody's perfect. Nobody makes mistakes. But at the end of the day, it's important to understand where it's coming from. Even though you may look back and say like, oh, I probably shouldn't have did this, and at the time I was like, oh, why is he making me do this? Whatever. I knew it was coming from a good place. It's not like I knew you. I thought you were trying to, sabotage me or anything like that. I knew that wasn't the case. So at the end of the day, I just kept it pushing.
Yeah, I think back about that. My sister actually, Michelle, told me, she said, why did RaKim cut his hair? I said, I made him cut his hair. And then she was like, why are you not allowing him to be himself? And when she said that to me, I'm telling you, it stabbed me so hard because I'm trying to not be a bad parent. I'm trying to make sure that you live a fulfilled life, a happy life. And then at that moment, I felt like I was halting you from becoming who you wanted to be, and I wanted you to become who I wanted you to be. So that was like a changing moment in my life. So we kind of discussed a few things right now, but what we're going to do is we're going to head to a quick commercial break, and we're going to come back and we're going to jump right back into it, so get some more perspective for the people out there.
Hey, it's AC of AC Sports Live, an interactive sports talk show where your comments are part of the show. Every show we focus on the sports stories of today, with commentary on sports takes, my 2 cents, which is a reaction to my social media feed, Sports Flicks, where we take a look at sports movies and give a quick review. We have a segment called Mental Reps, where we have words of inspiration to help battle the dark side of men's mental health. And then there's the Tender Love Report. Who's being soft or petty in the world of sports? All takes are welcome under one condition. Say it with your chest. I'll see you there.
So we are back. So I was thinking about the educational pursuits of family members or your parents, and how maybe they affect decision making as a youngster, right? So I know your mom is a successful nurse. Jen is my wife is got her doctorate degree and is an educator, a principal, and myself being a lieutenant colonel in the Army. You've been around some pretty successful adults in the household as you've been coming up in life. So how have our particular career paths shaped your perception of success?
Seeing a lot of people be successful in your life has always really made you want to strive for that as well. I see a lot of that around me, and it makes me really want to push myself to reach that, or even surpass that. Because you have a life that you see, and you want to be able to take care of your children the way you felt like you were take care of. So at least when you're in a good situation like I have been, I was blessed to have great parents. So it's always been a goal of mine to be able to provide the same way I feel like I was provided for, and even better. Just not just settle. To push as far as I can. Seeing success, it was a great motivator for me, and it instilled a lot of things that I really wanted to have in my future, and a lot of goals that I have for myself as well.
I remember you were taking AP classes and you were trying to finish up your work. I'm like, finish up your work or you can't go nowhere. Brief that to me. Tell me what that thing's all about. How does having a parent doing that to you while you're coming up, how did that help you, or did it just frustrate you that I was always kind of like, brief that to me, let me hear what you learn, read it aloud so I can hear how you pronounce words? How did that affect?
When you're younger, it's hard to understand a lot of that. So sometimes it gets on your nerves, like, oh, I'm just trying to go play the game. I'm just trying to go hoop. So it kind of frustrates you sometimes, but at the same time, it forces you to think about those things. It forces you to think about the stuff that you learned in school. So it allowed me to carry a lot of things, and I feel like just because even back then, we had a lot of conversations just about, the world. We had a lot of smart conversations, even when I was younger, a lot of conversations about learning new things and this going on in the world. Or we sit there, talk about all the animals or whatever, we always talked about something out, and those smart educational conversations always, put a big part in carrying how I am right now. So, so seeing a lot of that go on and hearing a lot of those conversations and participating in them really, really pushed me to learn more stuff by myself. Even now, I just sit there. If I see something interesting, look it up, read about it, figure it out. Just it's always carried with me. So it played a big part in how I look at things now and how I have conversations with people around me as well.
Yeah, I remember I was always tell you, look at that guy. Tomorrow, go to school and look at your friends and see what they're doing and ask yourself, do you want to be like that? So, but when I started also thinking about the decisions that were being made, as a young adult, what I want you to do real quick is I want you to reflect back, how I raised you. And then say to yourself, well, like, what things would you change when you raise your children?
You know, overall, uh, you've been a great example of how I want to raise my children as well in the future. So some things that I will probably change, is the biggest thing is I know that you have to do what you have to do to support me and what you have to do by going to the military. But a big thing for me that I've always, you know, I try to provide my feelings, having a nice household and make sure I can always be there for them in person and do that. That's one thing I would change uh for me because it's just always been important to me. I just look back at times when I was younger. When I was little, it was a lot more harder to me than when I grew up and I really understood why you wasn't there, why you was out doing what you had to do, just to support me and make sure I had what I needed. So just looking back when I was little, I see how hard on me it was sometimes. Sometimes I would get upset. I might cry when I was real little. But at the end of the day, as I grew up, you make a realization and you see why they're doing that, and you see why it's important to be out there and do what you have to do. So that's one thing I would change. Just make sure that I'm around. Make sure the mother's around. Make sure I have a good two-parent household, and just make sure that's strong. That's one thing I would change.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's just as hard as for me being away from you was the same. I never had really any lofty goals in the military, right? I just always felt like, what, I always want to be an impact person, and my time in the military has always been like, what, I got to be away from my family. I'm not playing no games. When I show up to work, I'm gonna be the best version of myself, because I want my son to see me progress. I don't want him to think that I'm wasting my time somewhere and it's being taken for granted. And I could sense it in your face, or I can see how happy you were whenever I came back, but I can also see it in your being when I had to leave. I remember I came back from deployment one time and I'm sitting there and talking to you, and things were not the way they were when I left. So I'm like getting on you, and I'm like, man, what are you going with all this? And you broke down crying and you got mad. You like, you left me. I didn't know what to do. You left me. And at that moment, I didn't even know what else to say. I was like, golly, you know what I mean? But I never knew you felt like that because you never really shared it. So during that time when you broke down and you was like, you left me, tell me about how all that felt. Like, I'm just a parent trying to make things happen. And then I realized how you perceived me and my job was affecting you in a way I didn't know. So tell me a little bit about that.
Just when I was younger, it was a lot harder because you go through a lot of situations growing up. A lot of hard times. You fall into a lot of things. That might upset you. You have going on outside of the family, and it gets hard. And sometimes you feel like you alone. You really ain't got nobody. So sometimes a lot of that builds up, and then it came out back then. But I learned a lot since then, and I always had an understanding of why. And sometimes, I kind of reacted in that situation when I was younger about how I felt, or it just it builds up over time, and it came out. Just a lot of things going on in life when you're growing up, and a lot of situations that you're put into that you never been into before. And sometimes it's good to have somebody there for you to help you through those situations. And sometimes I felt like I just didn't have anything, so I had to push through it myself, or or the situation might even got me at that time. Might even got me, might even brought me down. So that's a big thing that I was feeling back then.
So when we started talking about that too, there's a lot of things that played into that because I accepted like, okay, I didn't say, hey, you know what? It is what it is. It's my house. I never kind of really ever been like that. But I accepted your feelings. And as a parent, I think it's important, like, okay, he's feeling some type of way, but I need to make sure that I let him know that I value that, right? But when we think about parents and the kids, then we start thinking about generational differences, right? So there's a difference between how I roll and there's a difference between how you roll. But it's probably based on how we came up in the different areas or the different environment that we're currently in. So um, tell me what you think about how the generational differences shapes a young person's worldview.
So with the generational differences, growing up, your parents tell you a lot of things, and then a lot of those things that they tell you when you grow up, you might see something different, and it's it's kind of like it opens your eyes to things a little bit. See how different things were from when they were growing up to now. Because a lot of the challenges that we face are some challenges that y'all might not face, or some of the challenges that y'all face are some challenges that we might not have to, face nowadays. So that generational difference really, it opens your eyes more. It makes you think. You can see where somebody's coming from, or you can see why they're doing this, why they're doing that. And that's why it's important to talk and discuss things so that you can know why your parents might feel this way, or you can know why the kid might feel this way. That's why I always felt like it was important for me to express why I did this, or try to at least, because sometimes you might not know why you did it or this and that. But generational difference play a big role in a lot of conflicts and between parents and children. And you see it all the time where the parents might be hard struck on something, and then the kids trying to explain why it's like this, and it's just a big difference. That's why it's important to talk through things. Very important to talk through things and get an understanding of what's actually going on, because the world's ever changing, and I know the difference between how I'm growing up is going to be way different than how my kids are going to grow up, and then their kids going to grow up. It's going to be ever changing. So it's important to just discuss and talk and have smart conversations, even when kids are little. I feel like we always did a good job of having smart conversations, educated conversations. It's not just talking to me like I'm a kid, having conversations with me like I'm an adult. So it prepares me when I do get older. I know how to have a smart conversation with people. I know how to have a good conversation with my peers or the teachers or whoever it may be. It's important. It's good to have those conversation skills and discussion. That's why it's a great thing to learn and instill into your children and all that.
Yeah, I know we always shared a lot of different things. We've always, I remember I used to get the YouTube videos and I'd send them to you, and then we would just talk about it. And then as you got older, you'll send me a video. You're like, "Hey, Dad, you heard about this guy?" And I've always felt good about that because I felt like even though we were raised different, totally different, and we had to come through different things, we were still on the same plane. We still were able to address things and keep it moving. But I got mad about a bunch of stuff, but I never took stuff too serious to the point to where I was like, you know what, I'm done with this guy. I see parents. I have friends that ask me, how is your relationship so good with your kid? And I would tell them, I was like, well, like RaKim is like my friend. And I remember when you were really young, and I say, like, man, you're my best friend. You're like, you're not my best friend. You're like, you're my dad. That's better than a best friend. And I thought to myself, I'm like, well, I guess dad is better. But I wanted to make sure I watched the world change. And as the world changed, social media came into play. People were being bullied in the digital realm. and more things were available that just wasn't available that I didn't see. Now that you see in all this plethora of information start to close in on you, how do you see that stuff, even though I didn't see it a lot as a kid? How do you navigate your way through that, even though so the information is so readily available and it's so harsh?
See, the thing about social media is like there's a lot of information available, but you got to also be able to tell what's good information and what's bad information and what's true and what's not true. And that's why it's important to have your own thought process, your own values, and your own beliefs, because you're going to go out there, you're going to see a lot of different values, you're going to see a lot of different beliefs, you're going to see a lot of people saying a bunch of different things. And then, as everybody knows, there's some people on social media who just out there to just make people feel bad or say, talk mess about people. So it's important to have your own values and beliefs when you navigate in social media. So you know what you believe, you know what you feel like, and it's also important not to have those values and beliefs, but at the same time to be able to learn and understand things, because there's going to be a lot of people out there who who might see or talk differently than you, and even though you might not agree with those people, you can also learn a bunch of things from those people as well. So when navigating, you just have to stand by who you are as a person. uh and all this information coming through, it's important to see what's right and wrong by your standards, but also not just discard something because you don't agree with it. And it's important to sit there, read it, understand it, um, and just form your own opinion about it as well, and learn something from it if you can as well. A big part of navigating, like I said, is it's just knowing who you are as a person.
All right, going back into the generational differences between you and I, or a father and a mother and their child, what would you say to a parent that didn't want to let go of the generational things that they had when they were young, and not being accepting of what's currently happening in the world?
Well, you have to look at what's important to you. If your child's important to you, understanding your child and the things that they go through is very important to have a great relationship with your kid. Because at the end of the day, you raise them, but when you going on the downhill, they're gonna have to be the ones that's there for you. So you have to make sure that you're giving your child the best understanding you possibly can. Yes, they're gonna have situations where you might be right and they might be wrong. But at the end of the day, it's important to sit there and have a discussion with them and talk to them, not talk to them like they're a kid and everything that you say goes. Because even though you might be in charge, it's important to hear them out sometimes and be able to show them that it's that you can have discussions with people. That it's important to have discussions, because that's where it comes from. There's a lot of people out there that you might talk to and you be like, man, you can't really say nothing to them. And a lot of that just comes from because that's just how their parents treated them. They just felt like they couldn't say anything to their parents. They felt like they couldn't express how they feel, or they couldn't say this, or just everything they say goes. So they feel like that's the same way for them. So it's important that you sit there have a smart discussion with them. You talk about both sides of the coin, and just see it's a respect thing. Your kids are gonna respect you, and you have to make sure that you as well respect them. Because you're at the end of the day, you are in charge, and you're gonna make sure that they get on the right track. But you have to talk to them, make them understand that's where you're going. That's how you feel. And I feel like a big thing is like I always got that from you, is because if you might have made a decision for me while I was younger, or you might have pushed me in a certain direction, you always talked to me and told me why. It's not like, oh, go do this, and then you don't explain like, oh, this is why you really need to do this, because you're trying to learn these things for the future, this and this. You always told me, hey, I need you to do this because this is going to be something that you're going to need in the future. So and if you didn't have the discussions with me, it would just feel like you're just, bossing me around, making me do whatever you want me to do with no, substance to it. So that's why it's important to have conversations and talk, and just because at the end of the day, I always felt like even though I was a kid, I felt like you respected my ability to learn and understand things as well. So just you pointing me in a certain direction. It never felt like you was making me do this because of that. I always knew why. And I always knew that it was going to come down later down the road because that's what you told me.
Yeah, I know when I grew up, like I told you, it was just my mom. I didn't have a lot of holistic perspective, how to raise a kid from a man's point of view. That's why I said earlier, I just did everything that I wanted to do. I'm like, all right, let's go like this. But my mom did the same thing. My mom was really, really hard on me. But my mom also told me why, because I was the man of the house. I was watching over the other four kids. I knew the why. And since I knew the why, I felt super comfortable allowing you to go down your path, but also like let me tell this youngster why I'm doing this so he don't lose his mind. I had to body slam him one day. All right. So we're gonna go into a quick commercial break and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna close this thing out.
Hi, Joel Maurer, founder of Dink Ninjas. Dink Ninjas was dreamed up and started right here in Austin, Texas, a dynamic pickleball community. We arm pickleballers with the paddles, apparel, and accessories to dink like a ninja. Dink Ninjas is dedicated to supporting mental health awareness and cancer research. Shop our full lineup at dinkninjas.com.
All right, so we have touched on a broad range of things up to this point. And we've talked about how the young adult needs to mesh with an older, more refined adult, but how adults also need to understand that, like, hey, this child is a subset of who I am. I have to allow this individual to grow into their own person. So with all of that being said, so cultural perspectives and societal expectations kind of come into play. So when you start thinking about like the things that were important for me, like get a job, I don't need to kind of tell you why, go get out there and knock it out, be successful, just get something that you can retire at. But for you, the younger generation, it's a little bit more different because all this information is readily available to you all. And society expects a little bit different things from y'all. So when you start thinking about societal expectations, what are the challenges that align with that and what you think the world expects from you?
Societal expectations, it's a lot because you see a lot of different things. You see people who expect you see what society views as a successful man, and you also see a lot of things of what's bad and what's good, and it can push you a certain direction. Seeing a lot of that on social media as well. You see people walking around there. You see Bugattis, you see people with Ferrari, you see people who are sitting up there talking about this and that, and it's also important to see a lot of those things, and know what society's standards are for you, but at the same time, not let that stunt who you want to be. Because at the end of the day, what's important is how you want to be happy. What you need to be happy. And if you out there living a life for society and not yourself and your family and who you want to be, it's not going to be a very happy life for you. It's going to be miserable, because you're not living for yourself. You're not living for your family. You're not living for your goals. You're living for what people want from you. And at the end of the day, it's important that you do what you need to do in order to be happy, in order to provide for who you want to provide for. So seeing society's standards at the same time, it's not all bad. You might see some things that are good. You might learn something from somebody out there. You might see like, oh, this is how he got successful. This is how he did this and this. But at the same time, you got to also realize, just because somebody else did it like that doesn't mean that you're going to do it like that. At the end of the day, there's always a spot for you on this earth and how you can be successful. And at the end, you got to go out there, look at a bunch of different things and figure out what your place is in this earth and how you're going to be successful and how you're going to change it. So society standards, it can motivate you. It can bring you down. It can at the same time, it can kind of drift you in a certain direction. That's why it's important to be who you are, to see who you are yourself, and then take the next steps in order to go where you want to go.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you laid it out like that, and we get a chance to hear it from somebody who's up and coming in the world, right? So when we sometimes we see, like you said, we see the Bugattis and we see the mansions, and then some kids, they start thinking like, "Hey, that's what I have to be in order to be successful in this world." So those things weren't without social media back in the day. Those things weren't necessarily present with me, but it's also imperative that the parent, the adult, no matter what age they are, understand that the kids are dealing with something a little bit different than they had to deal with, and now they got to kind of bring it together and like go back. You got to see yourself in order to be yourself. What's going to make you happy in the world, and that shouldn't be placed on what other people think you should be. I mean, I even think about the cultural perspective about things, what's acceptable these days. So, or what is acceptable these days. So when I think about a kid whose name is RaKim, who has like dreads that's running around the world, sometimes people may perceive you as a certain person. They see you, they see your hair, they hear your name, and then they may think like, man, what is this guy up to? But not knowing that this is a kid who's going to college for mechanical engineering. Do you ever face some of those things? Because I remember, generational piece. Remember, I was like, cut your hair, but then I was like, okay, I need to take a step back and let him be who he wants to be. I understood that, but how do you think other adults view you when they first see you?
You know, I I have experienced that. I wouldn't say I mostly experienced it from adults, but mostly people my age is where I've experienced it most. Is because I have people come up to me like, "Oh, I thought you was mean. I thought you was this." Because I walk around. I'm a real chill guy. I don't really walk around with the biggest smile on my face all the time. I just be out there in my own world. Sometimes I just walk around, might look a little mean, but I'm just really chilling. So I've had a lot of people come up to me like, "Oh, I thought you was mean and this and this," and then people get to know me like, "Oh, you actually like one of the nicest people I know," helpful and all that. So it's why it's important, stereotypes and all that exist out there, but at the end of the day, that's why you gotta formulate your own opinions about people for yourself. If you think somebody's like this, like how you gonna say, "Oh, that person's like that," and you ain't even had a conversation with them yet. So and that's why it's important to go out there and figure things out for yourself. Because somebody might come up to you be like, "Hey, I heard he's mean. Oh, I heard he does this and that." And then some people be like, some people just take it, be like, "Oh, this is what so and so said. It must be true." But at the end of the day, I'm not. Somebody can come to me and say something about somebody, and I'm like, "All right." But at the end of the day, I'm not going to formulate no opinion about them. I'm not going to treat them any different way because somebody else said about them. Because I might have a whole different experience with this person. I might talk to them and figure out like, "Oh, that's why they say that about you," and it's not true. So that's why even though you might see something about somebody, you might see how somebody carries themselves or this and that. Somebody might walk around and they might look a little sad, but you never know what somebody has going on until you talk to them and figure out who they are for yourself. So that's a big important thing to me. I always felt like people see me walk around and thought this about me. I don't feel any type of way if somebody like, "Oh, you thought you mean," like, all right, whatever. But at the same time, it's like now that you did talk to me, you see I'm not like that. You see that I'm not mean. You're not. So it's important not to just go around and say certain things about people until you talk to them.
Oh yeah, that's a great answer. Hey, I'm gonna ask you one last thing as we go into closing. So real quick, in a couple paragraph or so, reflect on how parenting styles impact your youth and its independence. I know you talked about it a little bit earlier, but just give me one quick 30-second rundown of how my parenting style, Jen's parenting style, affected you as an adult today.
Well, your parenting style really affected me by letting me become my own person. I felt like you allowed me to learn a lot of things myself. you also, I remember at times we had, competitions, I'd be like, oh, who can name the most animals? What animal could do this, So it's always, and it's still the ability, because, I've always wanted to be good, it's like having those little competitions made me want to be, the best. I want to make sure I was on top. So your parenting style, it instilled a lot of things that I need to be successful. And I feel like a lot of things that got me through a lot of hard situations in life by just being able to be my own person and seeing and having my own source of motivation in times where, I might be by myself. So I feel like even though a lot of times that I might feel like I'm going through something alone, I know how to get through it just because of how I was raised.
Yeah, thanks. And hey, I know you don't do the social media stuff like that. But we appreciate you coming through today. We appreciate you talking from your heart. And what I hope is that the parents that are out there that was able to listen to this today, I hope y'all gain some perspective of how the young adults see us, and maybe how your things that you're currently doing are affecting their lives. And with that, thanks for being out here, RaKim. And for you, team, welcome to See I Am Me, and we'll see you next time.
Listen.